Hello everyone, this is the history tutorial video for class 8. In the previous videos we have been doing the Rayatwadi system, the Mahalwadi system, the permanent settlement, etc. Now we will look at the crops which the British government thought would be useful for the use in England, which they forced the Indian plantation owners or the Indian farmers to grow in their own lands. The British also realized that the countryside could not only yield revenue, it could also grow the crops that Europe required. By the late 18th century, the company was trying its best to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo. In the century and a half that followed, the British forced the cultivators in various parts of India to produce other crops like jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in the United Provinces, which is the present day Uttar Pradesh, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, rice in Madras. Now, how was this done? The British used a variety of methods to expand the cultivation of crops that they needed. Now let's take a closer look at one such crop, one such method of production, which is the indigo plant. The indigo plant grows primarily in the tropical regions. By the 13th century, Indian indigo was being used by cloth manufacturers in Italy, France, and Britain to dye the cloth. However, only small amounts of Indian indigo could reach the European markets and its price was very high. So, European cloth manufacturers therefore had to depend on another plant which was called woad, 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 which would make violet and blue dyes. Being a plant of the temperate zones, woad was more easily available in Europe. Worried by the competition from indigo, woad producers in Europe pressurized their governments to ban the import of indigo. Now, however, cloth dyers, they preferred indigo because indigo produced a rich blue color, whereas woad was pale and dull. It did not look good. By the 17th century, European cloth producers persuaded their governments to relax the ban on indigo. The French began cultivating indigo in Saint Domingue in the Caribbean islands in the West Indies. And the Portuguese, they started farming indigo in Brazil. The British, they started growing indigo in Jamaica. And the Spanish, they started growing indigo in Venezuela. Now, indigo plantations also came up in many parts of North America because remember, at this point of time, North America was under the British government. America was a colony of the British. By the end of the 18th century, the demand for Indian indigo grew further. Britain began to industrialize and its cotton production increased, creating an enormous new demand for cloth dyes. So when cotton production increased due to industrial revolution, cotton was made into cloth production increased. Now, as cloth production increased, indigo was very much needed in Britain. Now what to do? While the demand for indigo increased, its existing supplies from the West Indies and America collapsed for a variety of reasons. Between 1783 and 1789, the production of indigo in the world fell by half. So what was produced before, the rate of that indigo production was reduced by half. Why? Because there are various reasons which we will not discuss in this chapter. We will discuss later. But the thing is that when indigo was needed, there was no indigo that the British Empire could get. Cloth dyers in Britain now desperately looked for new sources of indigo. Now, from where this indigo can be extracted, from where this new source could exist? Faced with the rising demand for indigo in Europe, the company in India looked for ways to expand the area under indigo cultivation. From the last decades of the 18th century, indigo cultivation in Bengal expanded rapidly under the British government, and Bengal indigo came to dominate the world. In 1788, only about 30% of the indigo imported into Britain was from India. In 1810, the proportion had gone up to 95%. As the indigo trade grew, commercial agents and officials from the company began investing in indigo production because it was a booming business. Over the years, many company officials left their jobs to look after the indigo business. Attracted by the prospect of high profits, numerous Scottish and Englishmen came to India and became indigo planters. Those who had no money to produce indigo, they could get loans from the East India Company and the banks that were coming up at that time. So people from Britain, in order to get rich quickly, they came to India. If they had money, they invested in the indigo cultivation. If they had no money, they took loans from the East India Company and invested in the indigo cultivation, and they themselves became the owners of indigo plantations. Since it was a very booming business, indigo was very much in demand. That's why profit was always very high in this business. So this is how Indian indigo came to rule the world market. But as we will see later in the later videos, this indigo cultivation came at a very high price. We will see that in the next video. Till then, bye.